This bluff gap might be the reason a 6.5-year-old buck survives another season. So what connects these steep ridge systems? Let's find out. Welcome back. For those of us hunting in hill country, we realize that it's no joke. But some old mature bucks live here, and if we look closely at these bluffs and cliffs and associated drainages and ridges, we can quickly learn a lot without having to spend a bunch of seasons up in a tree. This terrain hides deer movement, but it also severely restricts it. So what if we could find these gaps from home, then validate them on a scouting trip? Shaded relief combined with slope angle shading with LiDAR at 1 meter resolution and CalTopo will show us the truth. The reds and the purples on the map, now that's the steep stuff. But what if we could find these isolated and often missed gaps in these bluffs? We can use this information to predict where bucks funnel through some of the really nasty terrain when they're traveling up and down and from ridge to ridge. Without LiDAR, these trail systems are invisible. Gaps in bluff country are now visible on the map and easy to walk to and check for sign. Let me rephrase that. There's nothing easy about getting to some of these spots, especially if you check out a bunch of them in one trip. That's where you have to go to find some of the best buck sign. These are a few of the places you'll find big rubs and big tracks. And if the sign isn't there, I'll just go to the next gap. Either on top or down below where the trail runs through the bluff line. You might have to look around, but the rub should be there. Often these are narrow trails between the rock walls, and the deer use them as the only means to transition from the tops to the bottoms, and vice versa. They have to avoid the cliffs to get to the thermal hub below and on to the next ridge. Find a few of these with big sign, and I start looking for thickets, beds, and nearby scrapes, and start putting a game plan together. A lot of bucks won't stay in one spot. It depends on the individual personality, but some roam the hills for miles, especially in the national and state forests. Others are just hermits and stay within 100 acres or so, especially some of the oldest 8 and 9-year-old bucks. When they have thick bedding for safety, food, and water, and are relatively undisturbed, an older, non-social prefers to be by himself. But they all follow terrain that helps them survive. Wind in their favor, a thermal advantage, cover or bluffs close by. To get to the scrapes, they follow the safest route with the wind and thermals in their favor. And this usually involves thickets and steep edges. But they still have to go through the bluff gaps. And if you know how to find those, you're a step ahead. In this scenario, there are 3 bluff gaps with trails, rubs, and thick, steep cover. 3 big scrapes exist, one on a flat spot where they normally are in the thermal hub, and 2 up on top, one on the east and one on the west ridge. If no other bluff gaps exist, and we want to verify this during our half-day scouting mission, then the 3 bluff gaps we found with big buck sign create a pretty good hunting situation below the thermal hub scrape, especially with a minimal wind and a dropping thermal. CalTopo's sun exposure layer shows a perfect thermal drop at 5:30 p.m. in November. I'd hang back around 300 yards until I could prove the thermals were dropping with milkweed, or I'd make my way to the stand slowly beginning around 4:30 to 5 p.m. I drop a lot of milkweed in a situation like this because it never pays off when I'm not slow and careful, especially on the older age class bucks. But I think you could sit below this trail and below the scrape. I measured this distance at 30 yards. If a buck comes off the eastern ridge, he's the one we're most worried about, because if there's a wind and if it's swirling, or if the thermals aren't dropping, he'll pick you off. I would want to verify it, but a strong, more than 7-mile-per-hour wind from the northeast might overpower a thermal rise just enough to keep your scent blowing over to this western wall of the creek bottom. Otherwise, I'd want no wind and a 5:30 thermal drop when I'm settled in my stand. How would you hunt a situation like this? If this helped you decode a few more puzzle pieces in hill country, like a buck would, hit subscribe. More LiDAR driven woodsmanship is on its way.